All right, Alexander, let's do an update as to what's going on in Ukraine. I think the big news is that the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant has been shelled again. If you believe the collective West mainstream media, the Russians are shelling themselves, and they've caused an outage. And because the Russians are shelling themselves, they've caused an outage, which will now lead to power being shut off for Ukrainian residents of the region. If you believe the Russian side of things, well, then Ukraine has been shelling the nuclear power plant, and they've caused damage, which has led to a cutoff in power to Ukrainian residents in that region. And we still have the offensive, which Russia appears to be putting into place towards Nikolaev as well as Kharkov. What's the situation in Ukraine?
Well, I think first of all, I mean, you're absolutely right to home in on the Zaporozhia nuclear power plant, because this is the big story at the moment. Everybody is talking about it. Zelensky said that a major nuclear accident was only just avoided. Well, if there was such a major nuclear accident threatened, it's largely because, to be straightforward about it, the power plant is being shelled. And I think most people who've looked at this, everybody who's looked at this and has retained some degree of independence of mind, agrees that it's Ukraine that's been shelling it. Having said that, I think this business about the power plant being disconnected from the Ukrainian electricity grid is a little more complicated than the Russians themselves are admitting to, because I've been hearing for weeks before the shelling began that the Russians were working quietly towards disconnecting this power station from the Ukrainian electricity grid. And one of the reasons why this crisis over the power plant might have happened is that because this power plant accounts for 20% of Ukraine's energy, it could be that Ukraine sought to create a crisis around this power plant so that it could retain control of it in some way, so that it could maintain the flow of electricity from it into its electric power grid. Well, if that was the plan, and I suspect it was, then it's failed, because either because there was a power outage or because that was the plan all along. The Russians have now disconnected it from the Ukrainian electricity system, and that looks like it's going to be permanent. So Ukraine has lost 20% of its electric supply.
Okay. Why were they shelling it again, though? Why?
Well, as I said, it may be, I mean, this is the theory, it may be that they knew that the Russians were planning to do this, to disconnect the power plant from the electric supply. So they wanted to create a big crisis over this. Exactly. Get the Russians out of the power plant, get their own people in, and that way at least it would remain part of the Ukrainian electricity system. It's a desperate ploy. It makes absolutely no sense. They would have been far better advised, if that was the idea, to say, we need this power station. The Russians are saying that they don't want to hurt Ukrainians. Well, let them prove it. Let them keep the supply of electricity from the power plant to the electricity grid. Instead, perhaps, possibly, they thought they could achieve the same thing by shelling the power plant. If that was the case, then they've miscalculated hideously, and they've given the Russians the pretext to disconnect it from the electricity supply system, which I suspect is what the Russians were planning to do all along.
Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to think about it, because if the Russians would have done that, they would have been branded. It would have not looked good if they had done that.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
even before the shelling, it wouldn't look good for the Russians. So why would they want to shut it down?
Exactly. So as I said, if the shelling was intended to prevent that, what it has instead managed to do is that it's given the Russians cover to do it. Now that as I said, it's not clever. Yes. Now I will say this. I have seen claims. I mean, the Military Summary Channel, in fact, some weeks ago, was saying, that the shelling was taking place in order to prevent the Russians from disconnecting this power plant from the Ukrainian electricity supply. So that was just one place, and I've seen it in other places, that this was some sort of overcomplicated plan to prevent the Russians doing this by bringing the power plant again under Ukrainian control. But as I said, if that was the plan, then it's failed hideously and it's backfired hideously. And it would be very consistent with the way the Ukrainians work.
I have to
Push back.
I can't get on board with that because it would go against the way the Russians have been operating the whole way through this. I mean, they've been very careful to not take out electricity, water, sewage, internet, anything. So I just have a hard time believing that they would say, let's just shut off the plant.
Yeah,
let's just shut off electricity because I don't know. What do you think? To me, it sounds very counter to the way they've been conducting the war for the past 6 months.
It's true, and maybe the Russians had no such plan. Maybe it's just the Ukrainians convinced them. Yeah, maybe just the Ukrainians convinced themselves that this was the plan, and did that. But either way, that's been the result. They've lost 20% of their electricity supply. I mean, whatever it was whatever objective the Ukrainians have had here, it's not worked out well for them. The Russians are not pulling out of the power station, and now it's disconnected from the electricity supply in Ukraine, and the result is that Ukraine's lost 20% of its electricity supply. So it's been utterly counterproductive.
I'll stick with my initial theories on all of this, which is knowing that Zelensky is this media type of guy. I think he wants to draw attention. He wants to keep attention, not draw, to keep attention on the conflict, which is dwindling. I've seen a lot of polls and a lot of statistics, especially from like Google searches on Ukraine, and the interest in the collective West has pretty much dropped to pre-war levels. And I think that Zelensky, for two reasons, he wants to keep attention on the conflict. What better way than manufacturing some sort of nuclear crisis? And the referendum. I think they want a distraction. They want to ruin and sabotage the referendum. You also have the tribunals as well, and all these things that are shaping up. I don't know. That's what I believe a lot of this was about. But,
and the Kherson counteroffensive, which never happened. I mean, all of these things. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying, but as I said, whatever the intention was, the result is that Ukraine now has 20% less power.
Yeah, but
I mean, but they have
okay, but let me give you a question. Let me play devil's advocate and say that Ukraine has the collective West in Ukraine, by doing this, they've been successful, because what the media is going to run with are titles saying Russia cuts off power to Ukrainian citizens, or the evil Putin decides to starve off Ukraine citizens from electricity, and he's using electricity as a weapon, shuts down the Zaporozhye power plant that he was shelling. You know what I mean? You see how the collective West mainstream media now will start building their headlines to once again paint Russia and Putin as, concocting this very evil plan this barbaric plan to starve Ukrainians of electricity. And it also feeds into the narrative, by the way, one last point, I just thought of this now, it also feeds into the narrative of the EU, which is saying that Russia is using energy as a weapon. You see, they're doing it in Ukraine, they're doing it to us.
Yeah, all of this is absolutely true. I've no doubt at all that they will say that. The point is, do the Russians care anymore? I don't think they do, because they've been called all these horrible things already. They've been called horrible things by Ukraine. They've been called horrible things by the West. I don't think the Russians particularly care, because from their point of view, if they're not going to be called horrible things over this power station, they're going to be called horrible things about something else. So, I mean, that is the danger. If you demonize your opponent to the extent that's happened, if you've cut off all your bridges to your opponent in the way they've already also done, then you get to the point where your opponent no longer has anything to lose. They don't have any concerns any longer about, what their reputation is going to be in the West or in Ukraine, what media stories are run, what government leaders say, because as far as they're concerned, it's so bad already, it can't get worse.
Can this story be used by the collective West to sway the opinion or to harden the opinion of their own citizens, which is that your energy bills and the crisis that you're going through is Russia's fault? You see, there it is. So as a collective West, we need to stay united, even though we're going to have many economic difficulties ahead. That's the first question. And could this be used by the collective West to lobby countries like India and South Africa and other countries that they want to get on board by going to them and saying, look, you see what Russia's doing to the citizens of Ukraine by shelling their own the nuclear power plant that they control in order to shut it down. I mean, you say it and it's just ridiculous. But anyway, could this be used in that type of manner, this kind of media narrative?
Yes. Now, about the global South, about South Africa, India, all of those countries, the answer straightforwardly is no. I mean, people in India, in South Africa, in Brazil, wherever, they know who's been shelling the nuclear power plant. They know who's created this crisis. Then this isn't going to influence them in any way at all. They're not going to be interested in this issue in that kind of fashion. About what effect it might have on publics in the West, to be straightforward about this, I think come October, when energy prices start to spike massively in Europe, people won't remember very much about the Zaporozhia nuclear power station. And I come back to what I said. Given what they've been saying about Putin now, not just for the last couple of months, but for years, given the way in which he's already, set out to be the demon king, I mean, adding more becomes increasingly difficult. You are, you've reached what do they say? It's the point beyond which so much mud has been thrown that any more mud you throw just doesn't stick any longer because, it just doesn't add anything. So I think most people in the West, in Europe, are going to say to themselves, are going to feel in the winter, we are facing an energy crisis, a fuel crisis. What went on in Ukraine over the Zaporozhia nuclear power plant really isn't of any interest to us. The fact that we can't pay our bills is what keeps us awake at night. Whether we blame our leaders or we blame Putin, of course, that's another question. And it may be that some of them will continue to blame Putin. Probably, undoubtedly, some will. But ultimately, you can blame Putin as much as you want, but blaming Putin doesn't provide a solution. You still have to pay the bills.
All right, let's wrap it up with what's going on in the Nikolaev, Kharkov, Donetsk direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting because, first of all, it's now clear that there's three battlefronts. There's Nikolaev, where the Russians seem to be making significant advances. And this is something that has come up unexpectedly. Nobody could see it coming, but looking back, you can see that there were indications going back weeks that the situation for Ukraine on that front was not particularly good. There was this lockdown in Nikolaev. There was this search for Russian spies going on there. Clearly, the Ukrainians are already getting nervous about the situation in Nikolaev. Now, about Kharkov, we have absolutely no information at the moment, but all except that the same sort of search for spies that we saw in Nikolaev prior to the Russian breakthrough is now happening in Kharkov too. So that suggests that the situation there is extremely difficult as well. And last but not least, the last 24 hours saw an attempted Ukrainian counterattack in Donbass. I mean, it wasn't just in one place. I thought yesterday that it was in one place in Bakhmut, but apparently it was in Ugledar, it was in Siversk, it was in various different places. It failed everywhere. But the fact, again, that the Ukrainians attempted a counterattack when it doesn't really seem to make a great deal of sense, once more points to the fact that they are basically finding themselves in an increasingly difficult position. They're worried that the Russians are gaining more and more footholds in and around Bakhmut city, around Avdiivka. This is this place, this fortified area from which the shelling towards Donetsk happens. So they tried to weaken the Russians, to break this grip that the Russians are establishing over these places by launching these counterattacks. It looks to me fairly desperate, and anyway, it failed.
All right. Is there anything else to add as to what's going on in Ukraine that we've left out with this update?
Well, I don't think there's anything substantive to say, except, of course, that we had Boris Johnson going to Kiev, talking about, Ukraine must fight on until victory. We have Zelensky talking about Ukraine fighting on until victory. We have Boris Johnson telling Zelensky, you're going to get all the help from the West that you need. And what is that help? A $3 billion arms package where the weapons aren't going to appear for 3 years. So the Ukrainians, I'm not talking about
54 million pounds. Sorry,
Well,
56 million pounds.
Yeah, I know, which is I mean, I'm not even going to start about that one anyway. But I mean, the Ukrainian people, I'm not talking about Zelensky, who understands the situation completely. The Ukrainian people are being taken for a ride. And it's horrible what is being done to them. The cynicism of it makes one sweat. I mean, it makes me really angry. It makes me very, very angry. But I mean, they're being told all the time that they're going to be supported, they're going to be helped, they're going to get all these wonder weapons from the West, which never quite materialise. And in the meantime, their economy's going down the tubes. They've lost 20% of their electric power, as we've just seen. And of course, they're losing territory and they're losing lives.
Money printing as well.
Money printing as well.
Inflation.
I know, yeah. Inflation, absolutely. Their living standards are being destroyed. Everything is being destroyed, all on promises that are never going to amount to anything. I mean, why anybody would want to believe promises coming from people like Johnson and Biden is another matter. But of course, in Ukraine, people in Ukraine may not know them as well as we do.
Yeah. We said it in a past video as well. Keep an eye out for the hryvnia dollar, ruble dollar, because with this next round of printing and inflation, that parity is going to start to get closer and closer, and that could be the absolute end of the Ukraine economy. I don't know.
Absolutely correct. Yeah.
Anyway, all right, we'll leave it there. TheDuran.locals.com, everybody, and go to the Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code Good Day. Take care. Bye-bye.